dears. Today I will start a series of stories about encounters on dating apps like Tinder that ended up becoming real nightmares. With today's busy lives, many people look for friendships and romantic relationships on dating apps without realizing what might really be behind it. People are not always what they seem to be. Grab your headphones, crucifix, and holy water as we begin another macabre story. A young man is invited by a friendly couple he met online to a dinner party in a secluded house. What seemed like a pleasant evening turns into a desperate fight for survival when he discovers that the hosts have sinister intentions. There are things that only time teaches. Certain looks, certain smiles, and above all, certain invitations. But not everyone learns their lesson in time. And that is what we will talk about today. What you are describing happened to a young man named James, whom I met years ago when he appeared desperate, carrying a weight on his soul that time seemed unable to alleviate. James was an ordinary guy, about 28 years old, who had just moved to a big city in search of work. He was a reserved type, which made it difficult for him to form new relationships. Loneliness, combined with the pressure of his new routine, led him to explore the world of online dating, something that at the time was still new to him. It was on Tinder that he met Amanda and Lucas, a seemingly modern, open, and energetic couple. Amanda was outgoing, with an easy smile and an ability to make any conversation seem interesting. Lucas, on the other hand, had a more serious demeanor, but he complimented his wife with a sarcastic humor that quickly won over James. Within a few days, the three began exchanging frequent messages, discussing music, movies, and even life philosophies. James felt comfortable with them, as if they were old friends. After a few weeks of talking, Amanda and Lucas invited him to their home for dinner. "We want to meet you in person," Amanda said, "and Lucas makes a risotto that will change your life." The invitation seemed genuine, and James, eager to escape his solitary routine, accepted. They arranged to meet on a Saturday night at a country house about an hour outside the city. Amanda explained that she enjoyed living away from the hustle and bustle of the city, where she could enjoy nature and a bit of peace. On the appointed day, James followed Amanda's directions. As he drove away from the city, the streets became narrower and less well lit. When he finally reached the address, he stood at attention. The house was large and elegant, surrounded by tall trees that swayed gently in the wind. There was a light mist covering the ground, and the only light came from the porch lights. It looked like something out of a movie. Amanda opened the door with a warm smile, wearing a simple but elegant dress. Lucas appeared right behind her, a glass of wine in his hand. "Welcome, James," he said, extending his hand to shake. The atmosphere was welcoming, and James immediately felt that he had made the right decision in accepting the invitation. Upon entering, he noticed how well decorated the interior of the house was, with rustic furniture contrasting with modern details. There were candles lit in several spots around the room, creating soft lighting that made the space even more inviting. A delicious aroma of home-cooked food filled the air, and Amanda led him straight to the dining room, where an impeccably set table awaited him. Dinner conversation was pleasant. Amanda was a natural hostess, keeping the conversation flowing while Lucas poured wine and talked about his passion for cooking. James felt relaxed, even comfortable. But as the evening wore on, little details began to catch his attention. The interior doors of the house had locks on the outside, as if they were used to lock something or someone inside the rooms. There was also a strange absence of photos or personal items, something that seemed odd for such a friendly couple. When asked about it, Amanda laughed and said, "We like to keep things simple, you know, not too many distractions." James ignored the little signs. After all, I was enjoying the company and didn't want to seem paranoid. But somewhere during dessert, Amanda changed the tone of the conversation. "James, do you believe in fate?" she said, with a smile that seemed to carry more than just curiosity. Lucas looked at James almost inquisitively, waiting for his answer. The young man, disconcerted, responded with something generic, but Amanda insisted, "I believe that some people are destined to meet for a reason, even if they don't know what." From that moment on, James began to feel a slight tension in the air, as if something invisible had changed in the dynamics of that night. Dessert was served, but he barely touched the food, feeling a growing discomfort that he couldn't explain. After dinner, Amanda suggested they play a game. "It's our tradition," she said, as Lucas brought a deck of cards and a bottle of liquor. "Let's ask the others questions. Nothing too serious, just to get to know each other better." James tried to politely decline, saying he had to leave early, but Lucas insisted. "Just a few rounds. I promise we won't keep you here forever," he said, with a smile that somehow didn't seem playful. The first few questions were harmless, like, "What's your dream trip?" or "What's your favorite food?" But as the rounds went on, the questions started to get more personal. "Do you live alone?" Amanda said. "Do you have family in town?" Lucas asked. James started to feel like the game wasn't as innocent as it seemed. When he tried to end the game again, Amanda and Lucas exchanged a look that made his heart race. "Ah, but you still haven't answered the best question," Amanda said, leaning forward. "If you could change one thing about your life right now, what would it be?" James felt the weight of their gazes on him, as if they were evaluating his response, and something inside him was begging him to leave. "You know, I really have to go. It's late," he said, standing up. Lucas stood, blocking the exit. "But the night is just beginning," he said, with a smile that seemed more like a warning. Amanda stood behind James, singing a melody that sounded eerily familiar. It was at that moment that James knew he was in danger. James tried to remain calm, even as he felt increasingly uncomfortable. "I really appreciate your hospitality, but I have to work early tomorrow," he said, trying to take a step toward the door. However, Lucas stood still, blocking his path. "There's no need to rush," Amanda said, her voice colder now. "After all, you're our guest of honor." She picked up a bottle of liquor and poured another shot, gesturing for James to return to the table. The light, friendly tone of the evening was completely gone, replaced by something James couldn't quite place, but it terrified him. Lucas finally stepped aside, allowing James to approach the door. He reached out to open it, but the handle wouldn't budge. Locked. Lucas chuckled softly, the sound echoing in the room. "You didn't think it would be that easy, did you?" he said, his voice now devoid of any trace of humor. James felt panic start to rise in his body, but he tried to hide it. "It's just a joke, right? You're all messing with me," he said with a nervous laugh. Amanda moved slowly, holding her glass of liquor. "You think you know us, James? That you can trust us? What makes you think someone you met online is really who they say they are?" Her words hit him like a blow. He knew he should have listened to his intuition, that those little signs were no coincidence, but now he was trapped in an isolated house with two people who clearly had other plans for him. James took a step back, trying to gain some space. "Look, if this is a joke, it's over. I'm leaving," he said, trying to raise his voice evenly, even though his voice was shaking slightly. Lucas simply apologized. "You don't understand, James. There's nowhere to go." Amanda set the glass of liquor down on the table and walked around until she was between James and the other exit from the room. She took something out of her pocket, a small metal object that gleamed in the candlelight. It was a key, but not just any key. She twirled the object in her fingers as she looked directly at James. "You know, we always need someone like you. An outsider, Someone who won't be easily tracked down, she said almost casually. James realized that you needed to act quickly. He grabbed a nearby chair and held it like a shield, keeping his eyes fixed on the two of them. "If you think you're going to hurt me, you're wrong," he said, trying to sound more confident than he actually felt. Amanda just laughed. "Oh, James, it's not about hurting you. It's about what you can offer us." Before he could process those words, James heard a noise coming from another part of the house. A low, almost moaning sound. He glanced toward the dark hallway and noticed something he had ignored before. The house wasn't as quiet as he had thought. There was something, or someone, there. An eye on them both. Amanda and Lucas exchanged a brief glance as if they had been caught red-handed. Lucas sighed and crossed his arms. "I wasn't supposed to know this so soon. But we're already here, why not know the truth?" Before James could react, Amanda tossed the key to Lucas, who caught it in mid-air with precision. He walked slowly to a door at the end of the hallway and unlocked it, gesturing for James to follow him. "Come on, you better see for yourself," Lucas said, as Amanda closed the front door again, locking it. James hesitated. Everything inside him screamed to run, but where? He had no way out of the house without the keys, and they were clearly ready to force him to obey. Out of options, he followed Lucas with cautious steps, while Amanda walked right behind him, closing the hallway. When Lucas opened the door, a strong smell filled the space. It was something sweet, like blood, mixed with mold, and something else James couldn't identify. He looked inside and saw a staircase leading down to a dimly lit basement. Lucas went down first, turning on a dim light that revealed the concrete walls. James didn't want to go down, but Amanda gently pushed him from behind. "Come on, James. It's rude to refuse such a special invitation," she said, her tone bordering on sarcasm. Reluctantly, he began to go down, his footsteps echoing in the enclosed space. The basement was cold and damp, with chains bolted to the walls and dark stains on the floor. In the center was a wooden chair with leather straps attached to its arms and legs. Beside it was a table piled high with instruments that looked like something out of a horror movie. Knives, saws, and rusty tools. But what really caught James's attention was the figure in the corner. It was a man, thin and pale, with wide eyes and a mouth covered with duct tape. He was tied to another chair, his wrists tied with ropes that cut into his skin so tightly. "This is the last guest," Lucas said with a grim smile. "You're here to replace him." James felt a wave of nausea rise as the gravity of the situation finally dawned on him. He would have me out of there, and fast. James froze for a moment, panic choking him as he watched the man trapped in the chair. The stranger seemed to be trying to speak, but the tape over his mouth turned his voice into indistinct mumbles. His eyes pleaded for help, but James knew he couldn't rush. Amanda and Lucas were watching, and any wrong move could be his last. "Why are you doing this?" James finally said, his voice coming out shakier than he would have liked. Lucas laughed, the sound bouncing off the cold basement walls. "We all have our needs, James. Some people need comfort, some people need money, and we need sacrifices." Amanda shifted, crossing her arms and tilting her head as if admiring a work of art. "You were perfect from the start," she said, smiling. "Alone, with no close family, no one who would miss you immediately. You were easy to find." "Sacrifice," James repeated, the word heavy as lead on his tongue. "You're crazy." Lucas snapped his fingers, getting James's attention. "Crazy? Maybe. But you barely understand the world you live in. This is bigger than us, James. You, us, this man." He pointed at the trapped stranger. "We're all part of something bigger. We just accept it. Now it's your turn." Amanda stepped aside, revealing a long, sharp knife that lay on the table. She picked it up, eyeing the blade as if it were a treasure. "You don't have to make this harder, James," she said, her voice soft but menacing. "Cooperate, and we promise it will be quick." James knew he didn't have much time. His eyes darted around the room, searching for anything he could use as a weapon or an escape route. The basement was small, but his options were limited. He saw a rusty metal bar leaning against one of the walls and tried to gauge the distance between himself and the two of them. "You know you're not going to get away with this," James said, trying to distract them as he took slow steps toward the bar. "People are going to notice I'm missing. I'm going to look for myself." Lucas shook his head, looking more amused than threatened. "Do you really believe that? Oh, James, the world is crueler and more independent than you think. People disappear all the time. No one asks about them. You're just another story with no ending." As Lucas spoke, James took the last step toward the metal bar. He grabbed it with both hands and without hesitation swung it toward Lucas, hitting him in the arm. The man was injured, his hand holding the impact site. Amanda, surprised, dropped the knife and tried to hold him back, but James was already moving. He shoved Amanda hard, causing her to stumble and fall against the table. The knife skidded across the floor, coming to rest near the bound man. James ran to him, pulling the tape from his mouth and trying to untie his wrists. "Come on, I'll get you out of here," he whispered. The man mumbled words of gratitude and terror, but the knots were difficult to undo. Lucas, still groaning in pain, grabbed a tool from the table and began to approach. "You're not getting out of here alive, James," he growled, his eyes full of fury. James managed to free his hands from the man, who immediately began to help undo the remaining knots. "Hurry up," James muttered as he picked up the knife that had fallen to the ground to defend himself. Amanda was already on her feet, her face now distorted with anger. She picked up a piece of wood and advanced. The confrontation was brutal and clumsy. James swung the knife, keeping Amanda and Lucas at bay, while the other man finally freed himself. When they finally broke free, the two ran toward the stairs. Lucas tried to grab them, but James hit him again with the metal bar, knocking him down. They ran upstairs, locking the basement door behind them. James and the man wasted no time, running through the house towards the front door. He tried to open it, but discovered that the key was not there. Desperate, James broke a nearby window with the metal bar and helped the man out. Outside, the darkness of the forest seemed both a refuge and a maze. They began to run, aimlessly, just trying to get as far away from the house as possible. Lucas and Amanda soon appeared on the porch, shouting as they chased them. James and the man ran, their lungs burning with the effort. They heard the footsteps of their pursuers getting closer and closer. The darkness made escape difficult, and every broken twig seemed to echo like a signal to Amanda and Lucas. But finally, they spotted the road. James spotted the spot where he had parked his car. He ran toward it, hoping that Lucas and Amanda would stay behind. When he reached the car, he unlocked the doors, and the two of them quickly got in. James started the car and sped off, looking in the rearview mirror to see Amanda's figure standing in the road, holding the knife. Her sinister face was the last thing he saw before she disappeared into the night. The car sped down the dark road, its headlights illuminating just enough light to guide James and the unknown man. The silence inside the vehicle was heavy, broken only by their heavy breathing. James tried to compose himself, his hands shaking as he gripped the steering wheel. He glanced briefly at the man beside him, who still looked in shock but said nothing. After driving for about 20 minutes, James finally spotted a gas station. He stopped the car abruptly and got out, nearly stumbling from his shock. He went inside, asked the attendant for help and called the police. As he waited, James noticed that the man was still sitting in the car, his eyes staring into space, as if reliving the horrors of that basement. When the police arrived, James told them everything that had happened: the dinner, the basement, the attack. The freed man, still dazed, confirmed the story in enough detail to convince the officers to search the house immediately. James insisted on showing them the exact location, even though he was terrified of returning to that place. The police took James and the man to the scene. When they arrived, the house was completely turned off. There was no sign of Amanda, Lucas, or anyone else. The place was strange, too quiet, as if nature itself had shut down. The officers entered cautiously, shining flashlights into the rooms. At first, the house seemed empty, but James led the way to the basement. The door was still locked, but the officers forced it open and went downstairs. The sweet smell was still there, and the stains on the floor confirmed part of James's story. However, something was missing. The basement was empty. No chair, no chains, no table. Just the marks on the concrete and a permanent oppressive silence. One of the police officers found traces of dried blood on the walls, but nothing concrete that could explain what really happened in that place. James insisted that everything he reported was true, but the officers were skeptical. The only concrete evidence was the man he had been saved, whose physical condition corroborated the narrative of having been arrested and tortured. Still, without Amanda, Lucas, or any direct evidence, the case was inconclusive. The days that followed were a blur for James. He returned to the city, but his life was never the same. The media covered the incident superficially, calling it a possible kidnapping and an ongoing investigation. Amanda and Lucas were never found, and the house was abandoned. Eventually, the reports faded into oblivion, but James could never shake the memories of that night. The man he saved also disappeared shortly after, without a trace. James tried to contact him to understand more about what had happened, but it seemed like he had decided to completely erase that part of his life. At night, James began to be plagued by nightmares. He saw Amanda and Lucas in his mind, always smiling, always slowly approaching with their evil desires. Worse still, he began to hear Amanda's voice in his quietest moments. "You were perfect, James. You always will be." Eventually, James moved to another city, trying to start over. He deleted all his dating apps and avoided meeting strangers. Even so, the trauma of that night never left him. He always felt like he was being present, like Lucas and Amanda were still out there, waiting for the right moment to find him again. In the end, James learned the hard way that not every smile is sincere, not every invitation is harmless. Some people live in the dark, and others, like Amanda and Lucas, bring the dark with them. And for you who hears this story, a warning. Never ignore the signs, no matter how small they are. Sometimes, intuition is the only thing that can save your life. If you like this story, like it, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so that YouTube will notify you of our next story and recommend the channel to more people. Tomorrow, I'll be back with another terrifying story. Until tomorrow, my dears, and may God Almighty protect you all, because evil does not sleep and is always lurking, waiting for our one mistake.